Da-da-da-da-da-dun-dun.
Every day we do a lot of things. We go to school, we read books, we play games, we eat food, and we sleep in our beds. When the word we are using describes an action, or something you can do, we call that word a verb. In this video, I will introduce identifying verbs, verb tense, auxiliary verbs, verb aspect, and modal verbs. Let's start with identifying verbs. As we said at the start, a verb describes an action. If it's something you can do, then it's a verb. In a past video, we learned that nouns describe things and ideas, but verbs are used to describe what you are doing with a noun. In the next example, the nouns will be written in blue and the verbs will be written in red. The dog is barking. Harry is reading. Notice how the verbs end with an ing? We can use that as a hint when trying to identify them. Now let's move on over to verb tense. Tense just tells us when the action took place. There are three basic tenses which we use. They are past tense, present tense, and the future tense. The past tense tells us that something has already happened. The present tense tells us that it's happening right now. And the future tense tells us that it will happen at some point. Let me elaborate. If we take the verb phrase to walk and make a simple sentence with it, we could say, I walk. This is the present tense because it is happening right now. But what if it happened earlier today? Well, then you can just say, I walked. This is the past tense, and with regular verbs, we just attach an ed to the end of the verb to change it to the past tense. You might be thinking, if that is how I say something that has already happened, how can I say that something is going to happen later? Well, the future tense of I walk is I will walk. If we want to say that something is going to happen, we just add the word will to the sentence. This brings us to auxiliary verbs. When we use the future tense, we didn't modify the verb itself to change the tense. What we did instead was add the word will to the sentence. The word will helps us to know when the action takes place, and this type of word is called an auxiliary verb or a helping verb. Auxiliary verbs help us to change the mood or voice of our verb phrase. In the example, I have been thinking, have been are our auxiliary verbs. Another example, I was given a piece of candy, our auxiliary verb is was. These verbs help us to define how the action is taking place. Next up, we have verb aspect. One way of looking at verb aspect is to see it as an upgraded version of tense. This means that we use aspect to tell us more about how the action is taking place. We do this by using auxiliary verbs. In this video, we are going to look at the simple aspect, perfect aspect, progressive aspect, and progressive perfect aspect. The first one we are going to discuss is the simple aspect. This is the most basic way we can state a fact. Example, Jack eats pizza. The perfect aspect tells us that the action has been completed. We do this by adding the auxiliary verb has, along with using the past tense of the verb. Example, Jack has eaten pizza. The third one is called the progressive aspect. This is used to tell us that the action is still taking place. Example, Jack is eating pizza. The final one is called the progressive perfect aspect. We use it to describe something that is coming to an end. Example, Jack has been eating pizza. Another type of helping verb is called a modal verb. Modal verbs are similar to auxiliary verbs, but they have a few different characteristics. We use modal verbs to describe the mode in which the action is happening. This changes the meaning of the sentence and also the voice. Example, Jack should study harder for his English exam. The modal verb is should, and it tells us that the purpose of the phrase is to give advice. If we change the sentence to Jack will study harder for his English exam, the modal verb is will, and the use of it tells us that the phrase is a command. So now that you have learned about the basics of verbs, please take a moment to press the like button and subscribe if you are new to this channel. If you want some more practice with verbs, click the link to the worksheet in the description. Alrighty, let's answer some questions. Question 1. What do we use verbs for? Is it A, to name an object, B, to tell us more about an object, or C, to tell us what the object is doing? Question 2. What is another name for auxiliary verbs? Is it A, helping verbs, B, annoying verbs, or C, modal verbs? Question number 3. Why do we use verb tenses? Is it A, to tell us what is happening, B, to tell us how something is happening, or C, to tell us when something is happening? Leave your answers in the comments below and I will see you next time.